You know how on most video games, you start at level 1, it's not too hard. The last level, it's just impossible. Level 1 are these two bolts. Level 3, it's this guy right here. You become a contortionist. You finally get it. You're like, wow, I win, right? Nope. Day 2 of disassembly on this 97 triple locked Toyota Land Cruiser. If you're new to the channel, thank you for the support and watching and all of the comments and encouragement. Make sure to subscribe for more updates on this particular project. And if you're into Land Cruisers, 80 series, 200 series, and boats, there's a bunch of other awesome content on the channel that you might want to check out as well. Make sure to subscribe. If you remember yesterday, we got all the stuff on the front end out. The radiator, fan shroud, alternator brackets, upper and lower, coolant neck, distributor, all that stuff came out. Intake hose, filter topper, the grill up front, all those are out. I'm trying to figure out where I want to go next. My back's a little sore, so I don't want to be leaning over this thing for the next few hours. I think what I'm going to do is lean even further over. Hopefully that's easier on my back. We'll see. Maybe with the throttle body, throttle cables, all of that. Everything works, but if you guys have had these Land Cruisers, you know the sheathing on these throttle cables starts deteriorating over the years. So this is going to be replaced. I'm going to pull it out. A lot of gaskets around here. They're all fine. They're working. They're not leaking. But since I'm in there, I'm going to go ahead and replace them anyway. I've got to do the valve cover gasket. So the throttle body at least has to come off. But I think I'm going to go ahead and take the intake manifold and all off. So yeah, let's do that. We'll start up here in this area, start disassembling, getting things apart, making sure we put the bolts and the nuts with the parts or tape them onto there just to make sure we don't confuse which one goes where as we get back to the assembly process later on down the line. What do you guys use for lights? I've got really bright lights up in the garage here and all the way across. I was going to put some lights behind me here. But then a buddy of mine was over yesterday and mentioned that, hey, if you put the light here and you're standing in front of the truck, you're going to block the light and you're just going to create a shadow and it'll be harder to see. And he's right. I went ahead and ordered, I've got a bunch of DeWalt tools. So I have the batteries. I ordered one of the hood lights, the under hood DeWalt lights. Got really good reviews from all the under hood lights. That one seemed to be the one with the best reviews, and I have a bunch of the batteries. So I went ahead and ordered one of those. A little pricey for what it is, in my opinion. I think it was 180 bucks or so. But I'm curious, leave down in the comments below, what are you guys using for lights when you're working under the hood of your vehicle without taking the hood off? I don't want to take the hood off. I know I can. It would be better. I could have better visibility, but my wife's not strong enough to hold the other side. She's only 5'1", and my two little boys are too little. But without removing the hood, how are you guys getting better lighting under the hood? I'm curious what others are doing. Let's see, it's been a while since I've taken the intake manifold off one of these. We got to get all the hoses off, get some of these sensors disconnected, the connectors for them. We're going to get the throttle cables removed and then unbolt the throttle body from the manifold. Throttle body is off. If you're doing this yourself, there's some hidden hoses underneath. Well, let me show you on the throttle body. There's a hose right here and a hose right here that are coolant passages. Coolant runs through the throttle body so that I think it's so it warms up during the winter, doesn't freeze. And there's some other hoses and things that are around it. You want to make sure to get those disconnected. There's a little steel gasket that sits there, and the two bottom bolts. The one that's towards the firewall is directly under the other one. The one that's towards the front of the engine is actually over a little bit. It's difficult to see, so when you're down there wiggling your extension and your socket around, it's not directly under this one. It's a little bit over. So that's where everything is placed. To get your throttle body off, you got to disconnect a few hoses, a few connectors, and 3 throttle cables. This one is kind of at the bottom, so you can't really get to it until you have the throttle body off. And then once you have the throttle body off, lay it on the valve cover, you can disconnect that one. The other 2 throttle cables are at the top, and you can disconnect them before you undo the throttle body. So that's the throttle body off. I've loosened up the 2 nuts on the EGR assembly just to get them broken loose. Let's see what we're going to do next. For this gas filter thing, it's I think part of the emissions, I try to always leave the rubber hose on this end and disconnect it from the steel tube, because after years and years, that nipple, plastic nipple that comes off the sensor is pretty fragile, and as long as it's working, I don't want to mess with it, I don't want to touch it. And then this side is going to a steel tube, so that's stronger, it won't break off. We've got to disconnect this for the EGR sensor. The brake booster line, I went ahead and disconnected, and man, just disconnecting it, it just fell apart. This thing, it looked new, the print looks new and everything. And at some point, somebody's replaced this master cylinder and this brake booster. These are not original. But whoever did it didn't bother replacing this rock hard hose. It's the same old one. I wonder if that was creating any sort of vacuum leaks, because there's no way this was pliable enough to create a good seal. Yeah. Anyway, we'll replace that as well. So now I'm going to start unbolting the upper intake manifold. It's a little bit of a pain in some spots. For each of the runners, you've got one bolt around each of them. I got to look around. It's been a while since I've taken one of these apart, but there's going to be some ground straps like this guy that need to be removed. When you do remove the ground straps, what I like to do is put a little piece of blue tape around them so I find them later on and I don't forget to put them back on. What are you doing, Aiden?
I don't know.
What's behind your hoverboard thingy? High five, dude. If you saw the other video, I'm still so excited about my DeWalt underhood light. I'll put a link down in the description below, but also check out the other video of the review on this amazing piece of gear. Look how bright it is in here. We're gonna go ahead and start working on everything that needs to be removed to get this upper intake manifold section off. First, I'm going to remove the power steering reservoir. There is one bolt here, and one over to the side right here. I already disconnected this ground right here, and this one has a clip. As I stated in the earlier videos, I always put a piece of blue tape on every single ground wire I'm disconnecting, or every piece of wire that, even if it's not ground, that I'm disconnecting that needs attention. Here's another ground wire, put a piece of blue tape on. And the reason I do that is because it's really easy to forget the ground wires when you're reassembling things, and all sorts of weird stuff happens when ground wires are not connected back properly. Everything from overheating electrical systems to things not functioning correctly, to injectors not firing correctly, to coils not firing correctly. All sorts of stuff happens. So make sure to mark with some visible tape. I use blue just because I have a bunch of it. That's painter's tape. Mark it with something that will get your attention when you're putting things back together. I also marked this wire here. This is not a ground wire, but as I was taking it off and I bent it just a little bit, the plastic sheathing around the copper wire cracked. So I've got to replace that section or try to find an entirely new section to splice in, because I don't want to put it back on like that. It'll probably work fine. Put some heat shrink around it or something, but I want to make sure that it's done properly. So we're going to get this off. We're going to get this bracket here unbolted from the top and maybe the bottom if I can get to it. I'm going to unbolt the dipstick right here, and then hopefully I'll have enough room to reach under from here and start removing some of the bolts that come up through the bottom section of the intake manifold into the top section, and remove those. There's generally one bolt on either side of each of the runners, like so, and all the way around. So let's try to get as much as we can disassembled. If it all goes well, I probably won't show you the whole process. If I run into any snags, I'll show you where I do. You know how on most video games, you start at level 1, it's not too hard, Go level 2 gets a little harder. Level 3 and 4, a little harder. By the time you reach the last level, it's just impossible. You can't do it, right? You think you can't do it. You eventually, you stick with it, you get it. So on this thing, level 1 are these 2 bolts around this number 1 runner. Level 2, maybe right here and right here. They're not too hard to get to. Level 3, it's this guy right here. You got a bunch of things in the way, your brake system, all the lines, your steering column. That's level 3. Level 4, that one right there, that's level 4. Really difficult, but you eventually get it. You become a contortionist. You try to figure things out, how to get in there. Level 5, that one, that's the one that's like, oh my God, this has got to be the hardest one. Takes you a while. You try so many different things, different sets of extensions, different angle and wobble extensions, whatever you can do, you finally get it. You're like, wow, I win, right? Nope. Level 6 is the one after this one, which is like right there, that way of this one. And you look at it and immediately get frustrated, like, what on earth? How is anybody supposed to get to that? I'm on level 6. How am I supposed to get to that last one? I know I've taken these manifolds off before. It's been probably 10 years since I've taken one off. And I've done several of them. I don't remember how I got to that last one. I'm stumped. I'm going to try a few different things. Some various extensions and things like that. I'm going to try to get to it. I might need a second person to give me an eyeball. But it's going to be a mechanically inclined person that is going to know what I'm trying to reach for. I think what I'm going to do is get my longest extension, put a short wobble extension at the end of that, go underneath the truck and try to come up from the bottom. And I'm going to have to get around the starter, which is like right there. So I'm going to have to get between the steering column and the starter and then come up and angle it that way and then upwards and somehow try to get on the head of that bolt over there. Now, I'm going to figure out how to get that guy out. What I'm more worried about is how on earth to get it back on and torque it down to spec. And those of you who've done this or can sympathize probably know exactly what I'm talking about. But I'm going to give it a shot. We're going to get this thing off. And we're not going to throw it off a cliff or take it to the dumpster or sell it to somebody else. Because of one bolt. It's not going to happen, right? Wish me luck. That last one, level 6. I'm going to get you level 6. Aha! Conquered level 6. If you don't have any, get yourself some wobble extensions. So for that one, I had to use this one, plus this one. This one was on the socket. This one was on my ratchet. And it gave me enough angle. And what a wobble extension is, lets these things wobble. Gives you just enough angle to where it's not a hinge. And you can also use these on impacts. So that got me enough bend by using this one on the socket, this long one on my ratchet, to be able to get that very last bolt, this one, off the bottom of the intake manifold. Then you've got to take the bolt off of this bracket, and now I'm trying to figure out what the best way is to disconnect everything underneath this guy without having to pull the harness. There is, let me show you. Now there's a bunch of stuff underneath the intake manifold, you can see. And all of it is sort of attached to these 2 brackets. And the 2 brackets are held together to the intake manifold by a few little bolts. One is right there, going upwards. And the second one is right there. Third one's right there. And the fourth one, it's hard to see from this angle. Well, guys, I think I'm gonna call it a night. I'm gonna go look up some diagrams, both on vacuum hoses and connectors and sensors of what all is underneath that intake manifold, just to make sure I don't screw anything up. hopefully, as I go through this and give you some visuals, this will be helpful for you once you're tackling the same project, if you ever need to take off the intake manifold for any reason in particular. But I'm going to go do some research, make sure I'm not breaking anything as I'm taking this stuff apart, because I don't want to replace sensors that are perfectly fine unless they're old and need to be replaced, which I would replace anyway. So I'm going to call it a night for now. I'll upload the next video as I make more progress. In the meantime, make sure to like, share, subscribe. Love you guys. See you next time.